Hello everyone and welcome. I see we have about...
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Hello. I waited
Well,
until...
at least it's morning here in St. Lucia.
Hi everyone. I waited until the last
Good
minute.
morning. Greetings.
Hello. So I'd like to ask you all to mute your microphones. Just so that we make sure that there's no interference and that we can hear the presenters. I just waited until the last minute to start the session, just to enable latecomers to attend. So welcome everyone, and thank you for the great turnout once more. We're continuing our ITC Alliances for Action series of webinars around COVID-19, and it's about resilience today and growth tomorrow, the theme of the series. This is the fourth webinar, and today we'll be looking at the UK coconut market and how Caribbean entrepreneurs can access that UK market. Before we start, I would like to thank our partners and supporters on this initiative, the European Union, the OACPS, CARIFORUM, and our implementing partners, CARDI and Coconut Industry Board. And here with us today, we also have Brand Organic from the UK, who will be giving us a presentation on the UK coconut market. I'd like to start to kick off this, this session, though, first with Dr. Wayne Myrie from the Coconut Industry Board in Jamaica. Wayne is a partner, an Alliances for Action partner, and he'll be giving a presentation on the Caribbean side of things, which will be a nice complement to the next presentation, which will be on the UK coconut market. I'll stop sharing now the screen. Wayne, if you'd like to share your presentation and start. Thank you, Wayne, for joining us.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Good morning to everyone. Thanks to ITC for this webinar. All protocols observed. And I'll begin a brief statement on the coconut industry in the Caribbean. The coconut palm, Cocos nucifera, is commonly grown in the Caribbean and serves a multifunctional role. The products from the coconut palm makes an important contribution to food security. The Caribbean coconut industry is a source of employment and recreation for food source, participate in soil conservation, also for landscaping, downstream products, and aid in biodiversity. The coconut produces a variety of products here in the Caribbean, and those products would be coconut water, coconut oil, coconut cream, coconut milk, and of course our very delicious confectionaries. If I may, I think the long-term overarching vision is to develop an integrated, sustainable regional coconut industry, which will grow and deliver benefits to all stakeholders throughout the value chain. The global production, and I put the global production to make a comparison with what we are producing here in the Caribbean. The global production is approximately 60.5 million tons. That translates into 62 billion nuts. In the Caribbean, we are producing, and Latin America, we are producing 5.3 million tons. In the Caribbean alone, that we are producing roughly 500 million nuts per year. Regardless of the very small relative size of the region, investment and trade in non-traditional products in the Caribbean have expanded. Whereas the traditional coconut oil, the RBD, which is the refined bleached deodorized coconut oil, that market has decreased significantly, but was consolidated in Trinidad and Tobago under the Simple Natural brand, which can be found on most supermarket shelves across the region. The production of coconuts in the Caribbean largely obtained in Dominican Republic and Jamaica, if you speak strictly speaking about the Caribbean. But if we consider our neighbor, the Guyana, or the country of Guyana, which is actually not a Caribbean country, but is a CARICOM country, and from time immemorial have caucus with the Caribbean. They are also very important producers of coconuts. So the emerging regional coconut value chain actually starts as it starts in Guyana. Guyana produce a lot of nuts for Dominican Republic and Trinidad and Tobago. That trade between Guyana and the Dominican Republic is valued at about 4.7 million United States dollars in 2014. And that coconut and refined products from what they have gotten from Guyana goes to the United States market, while the coconuts that goes to Trinidad are actually consumed through products in Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And those products are mainly coconut oil, and in some cases, coconut water. The global value chain, and I think in the Caribbean, we should seek to utilize all parts of the nuts, which we are not currently doing. We're actually wasting the husk at the moment, although some people are using it for making arts work, and also for making baskets and so forth. And also they're also using it for in the horticultural industry, such as in where flowers is concerned. The main issues in the coconut industry are pests and diseases, predial larceny, high cost of inputs, low germination rate, availability of resistant disease material, and an insufficient planting material. And I think this is where we need to have serious intervention, because you need to have planted material so that you can have an effect later on production. Many of our trees in the Caribbean are actually fairly young trees in most of the Caribbean region. And this is due because of the significant hurricanes that we have experienced. And the senility of our trees are also very low when it compares to what happens in Southeast Asia. So here we are, starting on the road some decades ago, and I'm not talking about starting in the 1990s, but that's where I think we have had significant decrease in the coconut industry because of competition from other oils, such as soybean, etc. And I don't want to get into the long story of how that competition started, but in fact, that competition had placed coconut oil at a disadvantage because of people associating coconut oil with cholesterol problems, which is not so, and that it is a fatty oil. Of course, it has triglycerides and triglycerides. One such important triglyceride would be the lauric acid, which confers on people many health benefits. We have R&D in some countries in the Caribbean, in Jamaica. A lot of R&D has gone into understanding the pest and diseases that are actually affecting the coconut palms, not only here in Jamaica, but in the region and elsewhere in the world. And so I think the final place that we want to arrive at is where we can have sustainable businesses that can impact the rural communities and put incomes into the pockets of our rural farmers. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you for this presentation. I think it's a nice introduction to the session. And I would like now to introduce you to Brand Organic. Brand Organic is a research and marketing agency specialized in specialty natural and organic products. And today we have Martin Hiscox and Tom Smart joining us to give us a presentation on the UK coconut market. So Tom and Martin, hello, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Sarah. Hello, everyone.
Sorry, I'm just having a few technical issues.
No worries.
Right, there we go. Hello. I'd like to introduce myself, ladies and gents. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Sarah for introducing us. Thanks to Wayne for that very interesting introduction. And thank you for ITC for putting this on. My name is Tom. Tom Smart, you can see there, I'm the research director at Brand Organic, and as Sarah said, we are a agency in the UK. We specialise in the natural and organic and specialty fields. We're commercial specialists, so we look at the UK market, and our sort of work with Alliances for Action has been to look at the UK coconut market, where the opportunities are, and where we will be in the future. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk first, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Martin. We're going to give a little overview of the UK market. I'm going to look at some segments and trends, some consumer profiles to understand who is actually buying coconut products in the UK, and have a look at some of the routes to market and make initial recommendations. Martin's then going to move on to main customers potentially to target, import and sales considerations when looking at the UK, including Brexit, etc., how we get into market access and penetration, and then any further considerations. Before I do, what we'd like to do is just run a quick poll, which Sarah's going to take over now. And that is just to ask a quick question about experience within the UK market so that we can understand a bit more about, you know, your experience with that as a market. So, are you acquainted with or have you exported to the UK market before? You should see that poll on your screen now.
So we've got about 50% of votes, so I'll just wait another minute to let people vote. And just a quick reminder to everyone while we're waiting, if you have any questions that pop up during the presentation, you can always write them down in the chat and we can address them at the end of the session or at the end of the presentation. Okay, so we have 65% of votes. I'll close it now and share the results.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? And very nice to see, actually, from our point of view, that people see the UK market as a a potential place that they would like to explore further. So what I'll move on to then is I'll move on to a market overview of the UK coconut industry. One thing I would say about the coconut market in the UK is that it is remarkably diverse. I've put up a quick supply chain here. Obviously, the producing country market is much more, we're not as knowledgeable about, but once it's imported into the British market, at the end of the day, the main places it's going at the moment is used in cosmetics, which we'll explore further, used in confectionery, so that's your desiccated coconut, etc., into biscuits, chocolate bars, and into the food industry for snacks, sauces, and as a standalone product. And then your three key routes to market in the UK are hospitality and food service, which we'll address together because they're reasonably similar, and then obviously retail. One thing I'd like to say straight off the bat when talking about the UK coconut market is it's an incredibly diverse place. Outside of your main segments of fresh coconut oil, water, milk, cosmetics, etc., there are a whole plethora of finished products. Just before this webinar, I jumped onto the Tesco website, which is the UK's leading grocery retailer, and a search for coconut on their website revealed 128 different products, ranging from raw to finished, cosmetic to household, and we'll go into that later, across 37 different categories, 63 different brands, showing you the diversity of the market, showing you that coconut is an appreciated commodity across all parts of the supermarket store and other stores as well. And I think that's really interesting because it obviously presents an opportunity. Coconut is thought of as quite a luxury product still, but it is also has health considerations and has also been swept up in the vegan boom that we'll explore later. So the first thing we'll look at then is we'll start looking at the key segments and the UK market, and we'll start with fresh. Now, what we can see on the graph here is the volume of fresh coconut imported into the UK from 2009 to 2019 in metric tons. It should be said that, as Wayne rightly said, the majority of coconut that we import comes from your Southeast Asia, from your Indonesias, etc. But there are trends. While the volumes have stayed reasonably constant over the past 10 years, we've seen changes in consumption. Whereas coconut used to be an ingredient, we see it much more now in snacking and that healthy snacking grab and go things that are far more available to consumers, and the health and wellness trend that's really sort of kicked on in the UK can be seen with Tesco and their own brand of sort of toasted coconut snack pots there, and things like this. This is own brand products that can be that can be sourced directly. The 2019 spend for fresh coconut, and this is import value, is 29 million, which was a drop, as you can see in the graph. Now, the reasons for that drop could be various. There's potential for new sourcing partnerships or poor crops or lack of demand, but we're not seeing a lack of demand. We're seeing a change in demand. Moving on to oil. Coconut oil obviously has, as Wayne rightly said before us, has seen a surge in demand. And you can see that clearly on the graph in 2015 when coconut oil really hit its peak. Since then, it has dropped off slightly. There's been a lot of sort of argument in the British press around the health benefits of coconut oil. But what has happened since then is that we've had real diversification. So coconut oil is now an ingredient in way more than just, your tubs on the shelf. There's been a huge movement in the food aisle towards virgin and organic. Supermarkets stocking their own brands. Certainly Sainsbury's, Tesco, the leading supermarkets, only stock virgin organic under their own label. So therefore, private label is an opportunity in the oil segment. There is also the body care. We have had, in the last 2 or 3 years, coconut oil used with toilet paper. We've had coconut oil, put into washing up liquid, into fabric softeners. So that really shows that the coconut market is diversifying in terms of finished product, and there's a lot more demand. What I should say is coconut oil imports under almost every single HS code into the UK have gone down, except for into one HS code, which is, we've said on the PowerPoint there, is 153, 1513 1999. Now that's the bulk greater than a kilogram, and it shows that actually there's some manufacturing going on in the UK that's using oil, and we're finding sort of more diverse uses for the bulk coconut oil. What is also interesting and backs up that point is that the 2019 spend was actually down. So the spend, the value of imports was down, and yet the volume was up, which you know, is in line with global pricing, but also, you know, the change in importing bulk. So what I would like to, with that in mind, and given that it's such a changing market, I think I'm going to hand back to Sarah, who's going to give you another poll, which is, given that the use is diversifying, and from a farmer's perspective or from a producer's perspective in country of origin, where do you see the future of coconut oil? Is it in cosmetics? Is it household based? Is it the organic virgin route, food manufacturing, or are we looking at some other innovation that really needs to kickstart this market, perhaps globally and not just in the UK?
Oh, so someone's just asking in the chat if they will have access to the presentations. Yes, we're recording this session, so we'll be sharing them through CARDI's website, and anyone who's participated in this session will receive an email with the link, so you can rewatch. Okay, so we're at 63% of votes. I'll just wait another 10 seconds. Okay, share the results.
Excellent. Okay, that's good to know. The organic virgin and food manufacturing and processing. Yeah, we'll certainly be looking at that further when I hand over to Martin later. But that's very interesting to see. Moving on to segments. We will look now at coconut water. Now, coconut water in the UK, once again, saw a massive boom up until 2017. It's much more difficult to track exact imports for this product because it doesn't come in under its own HS code. It comes in under a general water or soft drinks HS code. What we've seen in the UK with coconut water, it had a massive boom in 2017. It was marketed as a health drink, as potentially a sports drink, as a rehydration drink. And it really was, at one point, there were 40 different brands on the shelf of one London retailer. It's now become a much more mature category. In 2018, sales were down 12%. It's had its shelf space crowded out by what we've had is a lack of innovation. Brits haven't been receptive to the flavors, to the sparkling, to other things. And we've had kombucha and other healthy functional beverages that have taken market share. We've also had in the UK a revival for smoothies, fruit blends, etc. And the other issue that the UK now has is that Vita Coco dominate. They are the brand of choice in every major multiple. They have the ready-to-drink market as well as the larger 1 litre market, and you can see there that they've got 54% market share currently, and they're followed by Innocent, who have a further sort of 25 to 30%, leaving very little room for other incumbent brands. The interesting thing about coconut water is that it hasn't been seized upon in terms of private label like the coconut oil has. All the major supermarkets and independent stores and retailers have very much been quick to offer private label coconut oil, but coconut water has been much slower behind, and that could indicate that perhaps that they're not satisfied that this market is quite finished yet, and they want to see how it evolves. Vita Coco in particular are really pushing their market. They are really trying to innovate. They've had the sparkling waters, the flavored waters. They released a CBD coconut water into the UK market at the end of last year. And that really shows that people are trying to really innovate this market and it going again. What you will see is this was taken from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They've actually given the percentage of imports from destinations of coconut water, and this was 2018 data. And what you can see is that once again, it's dominated by your major players, as you would expect, leaving just 10% of room for the others. So certainly, you know, given dominance and etc., this is a very interesting segment, and one that is perhaps would be very difficult to enter right now. But given some innovation in 5 years' time, perhaps, which is what we need to look at when discussing coconut innovation, is perhaps may provide an opportunity, but certainly is a way to proceed with caution. So next, looking at milk and cream. Obviously, the difference with milk and cream is that it permeates a number of spaces now. The UK has undergone a vegan and vegetarian boom. By Sainsbury's have estimated that by 2025, they expect a quarter of UK residents to be either vegan or vegetarian, which is really hitting the dairy industry hard here. And we've seen a huge increase in purchases of plant-based milk in Tetra Paks, 1 litres, long life stuff. And this has been boosted even further, I should add, by the coronavirus outbreak. More and more younger generation are turning to plant-based milks. And while oat milk dominates in the UK, coconut milk has seen a significant rise over the past couple of years, around 14% rise in Tetra Paks. Canned obviously is a much more mature market space. There's lots of private label there. There's a lack of innovation. It hasn't changed for years. You have your traditional full fat coconut milk in a tin, and you have your traditional light coconut milk in a tin. There's a considerable private label share, but low fat, clean label, organic offerings are selling very well. There is potential for high-end private label. That's a trend we expect to see, and I'll talk more about private label shortly. And we've also got the increasingly large niche markets. There is the ability to import direct to wholesalers who specialize in Caribbean and or Whole Foods produce, and they are growing in prominence, and some of them supply supermarkets as well. With coconut milk powder, again, that's a mature category, but it's diversifying slightly. It's mainly used in food service and processing, and main route is bulk, but actually there has been some direct consumer coconut powder that we have seen hitting shelves recently. And then obviously we've got the Tetra Pak and others. With coconut milk, it's a much younger and more innovative category in Tetra Paks and in your sort of long life cardboard packaging. Private labels on the rise. Coconut is showing the second largest growth behind oat, and we've got diversification. We've had coconut kefir, which is a functional fermented yogurt, and the yogurt, coconut yogurt, is really exploding in the UK as well. Again, a similar market size you'll see in the top right as Mintel. Moving on, cosmetics. Now, this is where the real growth has been since 2017. This data here, which is taken from IRI, shows the percentage growth in sales of coconut-inspired cosmetic products. Now, all cosmetic products in 2017 grew by over 20%, but conditioners and shampoos were up in the 30 to 50%. Coconut has really become a mainstay in the cosmetics aisle, and it varies. It's not just your hair care products. Skincare has become more and more diverse. We've gone down the plastic-free trend, the sustainable, ethical, high quality, and it's permeating other household items. As I said, I recently saw some activated coconut husk charcoal, which was a skin rub, and so it's becoming ever more niche and ever more diverse and ever more value add, it must be said. The high-end cosmetics market is incredibly luxury, and coconut is a prominent feature at that end. You'll see the 2018 spend was around 12 million, so it's smaller than the milk and the water categories, but the 23% growth really gives it away. And we still believe that there as well, there is an opportunity in private label. Most of the supermarkets are now experimenting with what works and what doesn't in terms of cosmetic private label, and I will discuss that once again further. So, a new and emerging category in the UK, sugar and flour. we've had as I was mentioning earlier, we've got the health and wellness trend, the vegan trend, the free from movement, lots of people avoiding gluten, and coronavirus has seen a baking boom in the UK. Flour is difficult to come by, and people are turning to other options. Coconut flour and coconut sugar are really an emerging market, and groovy food have permeated multiples, but only very slightly, and it's currently limited to sort of health shops and independent stores, which you'll see make up about 4 to 5% of the overall retail market. Organic is expected to be a major factor in the growth. And again, a private label, lots of natural and independent distributors do their own products, and that again could be an opportunity there. Looking at other things, so looking at who's buying coconut products in the UK, there's a lot of data available for Vita Coco. They dominate the market in coconut water, but also some other coconut products, oil, etc. And their sales are far higher than any other coconut brand in the UK. If you look at who is buying them, 70% of purchases are female, and you can see that there's also a disproportionate amount of purchases are made in London. The people who buy Vita Coco are interested in beauty, food and drink, culture, and the brands they align with are Innocent, San Pellegrino, who are a premium sparkling water brand, Green and Blacks, which is organic chocolate, and also Alpro, who make other plant-based milks and other products. You can see that the main age bracket for these people is your millennials and younger. It's your 25 to 34 bracket and your 35 to 44 bracket. This is the people who are buying coconut products in the UK, and it's not your older generation. Now, with that in mind, when you're looking at places to target, your younger generation are much more diverse in where they're shopping. The older generation is traditionally the supermarket shopper, and the younger generation are getting much more diverse. They're visiting convenience stores, independent stores, and shopping more online. So there's a greater opportunity to hit the market there. And you can see Instagram is a very, very favored way. That's 31% more than average use of Instagram for people who use Vita Coco, and this is all taken from YouGov polling. So moving on, routes to market, retail. The UK retail market is fierce. It is very competitive, and what you can see here is market share of the major supermarkets from September 2017 and also May 2020. You can see the trends are that discounters are growing, your Aldis and your Lidls, and they don't offer much opportunity for value addition, unfortunately. But online and independents are also growing very, very quickly. The coronavirus has obviously been good for online, very good for some. There are certain supermarkets and other shops that are saying it's seeing 30% increase in turnover, and direct to consumer and box schemes are a real trend here. 1 in 4 UK consumers is now subscribed to some form of subscription box, and while that presents an opportunity, it's also quite complicated in terms of coconut and the diversity of the products on offer. Looking at private label again, the UK is a world leader with private label, and you can see on the graph there from IRI again that actually it is more established in some sections than others. Chilled, etc., is very, very private label focused, but if you look at confectionery, there's still a long way to grow, and personal care, etc. And these are ways that perhaps coconut with the right supply chain and the right links to processors and manufacturers could have some serious opportunities. Market share is expected to grow in private label over the next decade. It will be a trend, and the premium private label is really the one that is expected to boom. Brands have a very high failure rate in the UK. It's remarkably competitive, and so private label does present a less risky option for a lot of manufacturers, producers, and product suppliers. So the final place I'm going to look at, because we're not going to touch on food service at the moment because it's difficult to, given the coronavirus, we are still pretty much closed down. The food service industry is very difficult to examine. It's been very badly hit by the coronavirus, and we're yet to see how it's going to recover. But when we look at other routes to market, your niche importers and wholesalers are a very, very could be a very important starting place for certain Caribbean traders, I would have thought. Grace are very well established, and the other one to sort of take note of is Surya Foods, who supply a lot of supermarkets with their increasingly diverse world foods range. There's a significant Caribbean diaspora in the UK, 600,000 as of the last census, which was 2011, and the majority of those are based in London. So therefore, that's another sort of niche market that could be targeted, and that can be done by, you know, direct conversations with some of these importers and wholesalers. So before I hand over, key messages for the UK market. If considering brands, launches should aim to add value to a category. There is no place in the UK market for just asking to put another product on the shelf that just asks you to swap it. The UK consumers are pretty brand loyal, and without offering a point of difference to swap, they won't. Premiumization is a big trend, and 30 to 40% is best. And if we can tap into current trends and add value, there's room for rapid growth. Vita Coco's rapid growth came because they tapped onto that trend very quickly. And vegan, organic, healthy, low sugar, free from are all trends that are relevant to coconut. Private label is really yet to mature for a lot of coconut products. And at that, before I hand over to Martin, I will ask Sarah for our final poll, which is about to come up on the screen. But thank you for listening, everyone. I'm going to hand over to Martin now, who's going to go sort of more into the commercial aspects of how you enter the UK market. But I'd really like your opinion, based on what we've just said, of which customers would you target when exporting to the UK or any other foreign market for that matter? Would we be looking at established wholesalers, specialized niche, bulk importers, manufacturers, traders, or other? I believe you can tick as many as you'd like there, but thank you for listening, and I will now hand over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. I hope you're well. Thank you for the insight there into the UK market. I'm going to continue once we have the results from our latest poll from Sarah.
Thank you, Tom, and hi, Martin. Yeah, so we have almost 50% of votes, and I'll wait another 10 seconds for the results to come up.
Okay, so just while we wait for that, I'm going to be previewing more in regards to selling in the UK, plus a look at market entry and sales considerations, legislation, politics in regards to Brexit in the EU and other such information. Look at what's happening on the shelves in the UK too. So we've got all that to come up before we move to questions. But let's get the results from that poll to see how you view the UK.
Sorry, share the results. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to customer groups. Very broad view, but linking into what Tom was showing us there. If you're looking at the UK, how do you enter who sells who? You could be selling to an existing brand. We touched on Groovy Food Company, who have permeated mainstream retail rather well with their specialty coconut, semi-finished coconut products, such as the organic coconut flour. It is locally certified by the Soil Association, which is a British certifier, and does seem to be doing rather well. It doesn't have much competition, to be honest, in mainstream. So, as Tom has led on to, there could be opportunity for private label once retailers are more comfortable about pursuing that or see the volume potential. The next are retail and HoReCa, that's our restaurant, cafe distributors. These are selling into retailers that generally aren't classified as multiples. So we have a thriving independent and convenience store scene here in the UK. It's not as such like the United States, where you have major health and wellness chains such as Whole Foods. There are only 7 Whole Foods stores in London for comparison. So you do have a lot more independent stores that could be high-end specialty, farm shops, natural product stores, organic stores, etc. This is a brand, for example, available from an independent distributor that supplies 800 different retail sites in the UK. Now, the UK is made up of a wide selection of these distributors. We're a small island, but a busy one, and as Tom mentioned, a fiercely competitive one at that as well. Here's an example of our own label coconut sugar. This distributor buys in bulk and imports from overseas in bulk, normally from what commodities as they can get. In this instance, they do flour as well, and various other semi-finished coconut products. So you could be selling to a distributor who's packaging in their own label. You could be selling to a general wholesaler. These are bigger, they would generally well-known products, such as they may be part of buying groups. They may be commanding the lowest price. So more price sensitive there. You could be selling to some of the origin specific or niche importers that Tom has just mentioned. This was available from Surya Foods, and this is coming from Asia, and you don't generally see this. This is an organic coconut water, but you don't really see this in so it's kind of a standout product in niche wholesaler terms. And then the retailers, the large multiple retailers themselves. Here we see Sainsbury's, one of our leading supermarkets, selling a coconut oil in quite a small format. Interestingly enough, the independent retail stores, the health food stores, the organic stores, where you'd expect things to be more expensive, when it comes to coconut oil, it's quite the opposite. The supermarkets are more expensive. You don't see that very often, but then again, you see a lot more choice in independent and health food stores than, say, the major multiple supermarkets. This is the only coconut oil that Sainsbury's sell. Most likely, it's been produced overseas. That may be in mainland Europe, or maybe from country of origin. It varies. As Tom mentioned, we are seeing more packaging in the UK of recent times. But an awful lot comes from the Netherlands, and it's imported into the Netherlands from all over the world, and then packaged out and sent out back all over the world. They're a major processor coming into Rotterdam. So on to the next, and we're going to look at import and sales considerations. We're a country in flex, and we've not quite got over Brexit. It's been here for over 3 years and continues. The COVID crisis has, again, distorted Brexit. It may delay it. There are other things to focus on. What will actually happen on the 1st of January next year, we're not sure. We hope that we have a ongoing agreement with the European Union and we continue to trade with them, but it is all up in the air at the moment. That is relevant mostly when it comes to importing internationally, because we currently use European legislation and continue to do so during this transition period. That means we follow the same economic partnership agreements and tariff preference agreements that were available or agreed under the EU. The UK government is trying to replicate as best as possible those EPAs and tariff preference agreements. Some are already agreed, some are not yet agreed. It's still an ongoing process of negotiation, and there's talk of opening up new trade agreements with the likes of the United States and Australia. All of this is happening. It's very current. It's being debated at the moment. We continue to monitor this because it does impact then your duty and potential VAT requirements. For example, at the moment, if we were importing from Jamaica or say the Dominican Republic, we would fall under a duty, 0% duty tariff preference scheme. It's yet to be seen whether that is replicated. The UK government would like to, and it probably will. But again, this is quite a current issue. Also, when it comes to duty and VAT, it varies based on the products. For example, coconut water has VAT, coconut oil does not. And it varies from 0% to 20%. So the differences are on a per product basis. Cosmetics, household products generally would all have VAT. And a rate of duty higher than food. Organic, again, we follow EU guidance and EU systems for our current organic importation. We use a system called Traces, which is the EU-wide system for monitoring organic imports from all over the world. We've not heard any updates yet about what the UK process will be. We don't see there being any changes because the UK government has quite enough to do than to be changing organic import legislation. So we see that as continuing. And COVID-19, of course, has had an impact. It's currently having a stress on supply chains here. Coconut products being imported from overseas in countries that have varying levels of the crisis has created supply chain delays. We have seen certain coconut products go out of stock for a period. Things do seem to be recovering though. So hopefully we are going back to normal. Now onto sales. UK buyers are very busy people. I guess buyers worldwide are, but UK buyers are particularly busy. You have to be quite patient. You have to speak their language, and the timescales can be quite long. You could be talking to an independent distributor and expect a 3-month timescale. You could be talking to a supermarket and expect several years. Remember that they are, a lot of them, buying coconut products from pre-existing contacts, and trying to break those relationships can be difficult. Know your customer. Can you add to a category? Can you give them something new that brings growth to a category? That's what buyers are looking at right now. Mainstream products are not growing. Where they are seeing growth are innovative products, trending products, specialty products, anything that can add to a category rather than replace. So would you be able to replace, for example, a Sainsbury's coconut oil? It depends on the price and quality, of course, amongst other things. But Sainsbury's aren't currently looking at replacing that, I imagine, because they already have the product. So it's really about understanding your customer, their category, and seeing what are they looking to achieve in terms of adding new products. And I have myself in the last year pitched a coconut water brand from Europe to a UK distributor, and the response to me was, how is this going to grow the category more than what we're currently achieving from the incumbent brands, which were Vita Coco, including one of them. So it's some products, some categories are seen as quite stagnant, and just adding another brand to the mix isn't desirable. So you really do have to think differently in some categories. When it comes to marketing and trade shows being a predominant method of marketing, there's a host of UK trade shows currently suspended, but we hope they come back. But UK buyers do go to a lot of shows in mainland Europe, notably for organic products, BioFac in Germany. There's SIAL in Paris that's very popular. And there's a variety of others. German trade shows are often quite popular for UK buyers when they're looking at specialty products. And you always see the international pavilions at these shows. So trade shows are a prominent way of reaching these buyers. And when it comes to the sales side in the UK expertise is an absolute, maybe obvious requirement. You need to understand how these buyers work, how supply chains work. We do seem to have quite a different way of working compared to mainland Europe. So if you do currently trade with people in mainland Europe or the EU, don't expect that to be the same in the UK. It can be quite different sales landscape here. In terms of requirements for you supplying the UK, standards and certifications such as BRC or ISOs, it really depends on the customer that you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a supermarket, of course, expect a very long list of requirements and sign off. When it comes to certifications, for example, specialty retail will probably want organic certification, and they probably want some level of vegan certification, depending on how strict they are. Sounds obvious, but some, in terms of potential additives being used, they want to make sure there's no animal products, because as Tom said, the vegan and vegetarian trend in the UK is big. We expect 25% of the UK following one of those dietary preferences by 2025. So it is becoming more prominent. Legal, you do need to be registered with the UK government. You need an EORI number, which is through HMRC, which is Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. You need to be registered across multiple platforms, and the documentation that you need to supply as well needs to be written in clear English. It needs to be by GBP, whether you're selling in British pound or not. And your labelling is still following EU law, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. It may change in the years to come once we've gone through the Brexit process. But currently we're using EU guidance, same with when it comes to organic labelling as well. On to the next slide, and briefly we'll look at three quite broad areas you may be looking at targeting here. You may be looking to supply bulk, so bulk bags on a pallet of, say, coconut chips, semi-finished products like flour, and supplying that to wholesalers and distributors. You may be looking to supply branded products. This product here was shipped from Sri Lanka in the UK ready format. That's quite a commonplace thing. Sri Lanka is quite a prominent supplier of organic coconut oil into the UK, and here's an example of one. Or you may be supplying into finished products, for example, specialty chocolate. This is an organic vegan chocolate bar, so it doesn't have dairy. It uses creamed coconut, and it uses coconut blossom sugar for sweetness, so no refined sugars either. This is following a multitude of trends in one product right here. You may decide that you wish to enter finished products. This is often a value builder for some producers to consider. And the finished products area segment in regards to coconut is very broad, is one of the broadest we see actually. I think Tom mentioned how many different categories in Tesco you see coconut products now. It's big business, and I see it not slowing down as coconut attaches itself to UK trends so prominently. So next we look at what's happening on the shelves. So this was recent, this was at Whole Foods in London, and we're looking at their oils shelf. Not that many brands, really. You can tell by the number of facings they have. Prominent brands here are Biona, which is a leading organic brand in the UK. Vita Coco, interestingly, their oil is organic, unlike their waters. And Lucy B, which is quite different in terms of it's very firm on its sourcing and being fair trade and following that route. Don't see that very often with coconut oil, I'll be honest. Lucy B does stand out in that kind of messaging. It is predominantly organic, whether it's specialty retail or mainstream multiple supermarkets. You only really see organic virgin coconut oil, and you don't see as many brands as this in supermarkets, as I mentioned earlier. It is lacking innovation. It's quite stagnant. This has been the case for years. We do have culinary / odorless coconut oil for people that don't want such a strong coconut flavor, and for use in cooking, often cheaper than the virgin coconut oil options. There's very few liquids and sprays. There's one liquid at the bottom left there, which is rather expensive. There's very little mention of MCT. That isn't really here yet. We'll touch on that in a moment in terms of trends that may be coming. There's a low focus on sustainability, really. It's not so much in terms of where it comes from, the origin, anything like that. It's not so prominent. And interestingly, we see ghee in the middle here, which is growing quite rapidly. So the fact that Whole Foods are merchandising it right in the middle of coconut oil does show that it's quite prominent and growing oil, and maybe an alternative for people. Obviously, that doesn't follow vegan trends, but it is growing in popularity. So that's an example of oils in London. And on the next, we look at their waters. This hasn't changed very much for quite a few years. It's quite flat. What we do have here, Vita Coco leading. They've had recent rebrands, and they've recently added in the top right a pressed coconut, which has a slightly different ingredient mix, not too different to standard coconut water. And then in the middle we have raw. Now these are often pink, raw, dare say natural coconut or fresh coconut waters that are actually processed in the UK. They are more expensive. You only really see these in specialty shops, and there have been more brands before, but most have gone. There are two leaders, and that's Chi and Rebel Kitchen on the right. We do a variety of, say, vegan products alongside this organic coconut water as well. Not very much innovation or change here. We look at some innovation happening. We're seeing some sparkling coconut waters and some flavored waters in some supermarkets. It's very small though. It's not quite there. It's certainly not at a level that we've seen in the US. And you want to know what that green one, the green brand in the middle, I think that's aloe vera, which again isn't a big category, but is a water. So they put that in between the coconut waters there. It's not very many brands. You can see actually just in the bottom right there, Innocent, which is now owned by Coca-Cola. It's a London-based brand, made popular by smoothies. But in mainstream retail, Vita Coco and Innocent are the leaders. And on to the next slide, we think about what's next, what's for the future. This is a picture from the US and California, Sprouts Farmers Market there, a whole shelf of rather expensive MCT oil. This hasn't materialized in the UK yet. To give you a guide, the UK can be a bit behind trends in the US. Sometimes they catch on, sometimes they don't. Think kombucha, we got there eventually. It's now quite a prominent, fast-growing category here. So you can look at things in the United States and think, could that work in the UK? For example, look how big keto is in the US. It's nowhere near that big or of that much awareness in the UK just yet. So you have to look at these trends and think, how could they translate into the UK? Would a coconut brand that's focused on sustainability and fair trade work potentially, could that break through as a kind of USP and messaging that would work with an increasingly a consumer that's increasingly bothered by the sustainability of the products that they buy, and ensuring that people are benefiting or have a sustainable lifestyle back in the country of origin. Has coconut water peaked? We don't know. It's fairly flat at the moment, not much innovation, kind of a reluctance from retailers to consider other options, but it may increase, it may come back if the health benefits are fully understood, because we don't think that they are. Coconut water does have an unfair advantage because of the 20% VAT tax that it has on it as well, so it can be seen as quite expensive. That doesn't help. Is the UK at an early stage of growth and innovation with finished coconut products? We're seeing a lot of diversification, whether it be healthy snacking, healthy drinking, natural home and body care. Think about veganism, where could that go next? Milk alternatives and dairy, meat alternatives are big business at the moment, much as we see in the United States. Could we be seeing equivalents like jackfruit, which is often used as a meat alternative, materializing more with coconut options on the shelf? We're starting to see coconut jerky emerge as an option. That you really can just let your imagination run a little bit wild here when it comes to thinking what could be next. And I think the UK market is ready for that, following these trends of veganism, and the fact that people do generally look at coconut favorably as a good product that's good for them, and it's natural, and really it's almost seen as a high-end kind of luxury. So on to further considerations then. Your key messages for the UK market, in our opinion, is that as an exporter, you should consider a UK sales agent. Whether you're focusing on bulk, wholesale, private label, or branded work, you need somebody that understands how to talk to the UK buyers. They are quite different to buyers overseas, and the supply chains and logistics channels are quite different as well. So you do need somebody who knows what they're doing and can sell your product effectively. Importation requirements, you do need a specialist importer and forwarder, especially if doing organic, especially in light of all the changes that could be happening in regards to Brexit. You need somebody that knows what's happening and is up to date, so that problems don't happen when things are coming into the country. Brexit does continue to change things. Monitoring that is one of our main tasks at the moment as we import from all over, not just Europe. And if things are being published quite regularly in terms of updates there. Healthy lifestyle trends are really quite big and don't slow down. We are seeing that despite the uncertain economy here, they believe that organic is one of the trends that isn't going to slow down. It's in fact going to go even bigger because people care about what they're eating and their immunity in light of all this talk around the virus. So, could it be that we have permanent change in people's mindsets and in the way that they shop? These are the current questions that are currently unanswered, but we think that lasting changes will happen as a result of the current climate that's happening in the world. And coconut is already viewed as premium luxury. We think that could be increasing in value as premiumization matures, the likes of cosmetics and so on. And people really do start looking at the raw ingredient and going, is this the best quality possible? And yet that's going to be led by the producers and manufacturers, really. But there we go. That's an overview from me in terms of sales and brands and trends and things happening in the UK. It's a very busy place. It's a very exciting place. And for anybody looking at it, there seems to be potential. But we welcome any questions now, either through the chat or indeed in person.
We have some in the chat. Thank you, Martin. That was really insightful. We do have some questions in the chat. Let me put them up. So, are there any benefits in the coconut leaves? I don't know if that's a question you can address. Another one is, do you have information on the demand for non-food products?
I mean, I can sort of have a look at that one. I think you know, we address some of the non-food products in terms of, you know, the real trend for that is your cosmetics. There are other things, as I mentioned, you know, your husk charcoal and but again, it's niche body care. It's niche cosmetics. Non-food sort of bulk coconut oil and other products aren't growing. Certainly, direct imports into the UK. Martin, I don't know if you'd add anything on that.
I think from the graphs that you're showing, it is growing, right?
Well, yeah, because I mean, cosmetics is the main place for your
that's the
non-food.
main growth,
yeah,
main growth area. So, I think that actually that question may have come in just before we showed that screen. But we do see that demand for non-food products is increasing quite rapidly, but of course, probably from a lower volume than food, which, you know, would have a greater volume. So perhaps that growth is over exaggerated, but actually when we're out there looking at the shelves, going to trade shows, the amount of diversification and the amount of coconut that you're seeing in products, from soap to shampoos to toilet rolls, as we mentioned, I only saw that yesterday, which surprised me. But, you know, it is permeating a lot of different products. So, coconut is being seen as you know, quite a trending ingredient in itself, Tom, I would say.
Yeah, and I've just seen through the chat that someone's asked if by geotextiles mats, and that's not something that's caught on in any significant volume. Certainly, I think that would be very much a niche, a very much niche sort of individual contact sort of market you'd be looking at there.
I see a question regarding low focus on sustainability. Can you dig further, please? Of course, sustainability is quite a broad term. It could refer to social sustainability, ensuring people have a living wage and are able to invest into their lives, their livelihoods, and their farms. It could mean environmentally, are we taking measures to limit impact to the environment? In fact, it covers quite a broad area. It covers all of these things. In terms of a coconut brand coming in and really championing sustainability, what could it be doing? It could be saying quite obviously that this is benefiting farmers better than other options. It could say that it's going above what other brands are paying. That kind of activity, these kind of messages are very common when it comes to things like coffee. We see that widespread, and it's a very, very active market when it comes to this kind of messaging and USPs and very brand-led. So we don't see that. We don't see that happening with coconut oil, coconut waters, and it could be the way that you break in, and like has done with other commodities. We see that in terms of high-end or specialty coffee, that one of the top performers is coffee grown by women, which resonates with a young audience here in the UK. So it really is quite a diverse area, and we think that considering there's not that many brands to be taking on here, it could be an opportunity. But you want to do a bit more than just have a nice message on the front, I think.
And Martin, can I just add something to that? And just to say that actually what I perhaps failed to touch on in my part of the presentation is the rise in popularity of certification schemes in the UK. Rainforest Alliance in particular, while fair trade has stagnated slightly, Rainforest Alliance has really grown, as has organic, and those are, that ethical consumerism alongside the wellness trend is really a growing movement in the UK, and yeah, the frog is very popular amongst British consumers. So it's certainly something to consider for any producer, I would say now, that is able to work within their sort of mandate.
Got a question about the, oh, sorry.
We just have it just quickly. There's a question from Barton Clark, who's the Executive Director of the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, our key partner for our projects in the Caribbean and also on this webinar. So Barton is asking, what is the market prospect for frozen coconut water, not pasteurized coconut water? Frozen, fresh maybe?
Frozen coconut water. In regards to it being shipped as frozen?
Maybe he means fresh, Barton?
Fresh.
No,
unadulterated, frozen.
It's actually oh, sorry. Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, Wayne, are you going to add to it, or?
Yeah, I'm going to add to it. It's actually frozen coconut water because of the problems with the shelf life of the coconut water. It has to be transported frozen from, for example, anywhere in the Caribbean, Jamaica or anywhere else in the Caribbean, to the destination market. And when it's put on the supermarket shelves, it is put on the supermarket shelf frozen, so that so that the coconut can have water can have an extended shelf life, and the consumers will actually get a fairly fresh product to drink. If it is not done that way, we tend to have a lot of spoilage.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something we've seen in great detail at all, Martin, I would say. It's certainly not something I've ever seen in a UK retailer, Wayne. So it would be interesting to see how that could be pitched. Martin, would you say, in terms of, what we are, what we are predicting is a slight change in taste. So in the same way that the UK has just gone through a premiumization with coffee and chocolate, and taste has really changed, could 5 years down the line coconut be about to undergo that, where consumers rightly start to understand that the coconut they're getting pasteurized is not necessarily the full flavor of a coconut, and could frozen be the answer to that? So what I would say is that is not a market that is in any way significant at the moment, but certainly could have potential if pitched in the right way, I think, is certainly. And Martin, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, well, I think it certainly has a prospect here. I would say the vast majority of people in the United Kingdom don't know what a fresh coconut tastes like. They know what the flavour of coconut is. So if you could bring the real deal closer to home, I think that would be quite welcome. You do get quite short life fresh coconuts on the shelf in certain specialty shops, but they are expensive and cost prohibitive. So this may be a way for that cost to maybe be challenged. Also, I'm thinking that increasingly people travel, they've been to other countries, they've tasted what a fresh coconut tastes like. So maybe that could edge in the premium market a little bit for people that want something truer and more like the real product, as opposed to a pasteurized long life product on the shelf of most stores. So quite possibly, and one I'd certainly be interested in discussing further with you, Barton, I would say.
I have a question now for Wayne and Tristan. Tristan is here from CARDI. What about domestic market for Caribbean processed products, including those that are exported or that are commercialized in the UK? So this is a question for Wayne and Tristan. Do you guys have anything to say on this?
Could you repeat, Sarah?
What about domestic market for Caribbean processed products, including those that are exported or that are commercialized in the UK? So basically, products that you already have for export that you're exporting? What about the domestic market? Will they sell in the Caribbean region? I think that's the question, right?
Yes, the domestic market is alive and well. A lot of people are purchasing coconut milk and so forth from the major companies such as Grace and Goya. And you can see the many different diverse products of coconuts on the supermarket shelves from all these companies, these two companies, and also from company in Trinidad and Tobago. So yes, people are consuming it from the supermarket shelves.
Thank you. Just another question from Barton. He's talking about a product that we actually developed with ITC Alliances for Action and CARDI, which was a chocolate bar that was made from cocoa beans sourced in Ghana, ethically sourced, and coconut flakes from St. Lucia, I think it was. So the coconut flakes were sustainably produced. So it was sort of ethical, sustainable products. And Barton's question is, what are the market possibilities?
So we're also working on a chocolate report alongside Alliances for Action, and we've actually studied that very product within that report and made recommendations in terms of branding. We are scoping the potential of brands in the UK, maybe an umbrella brand uniting such stakeholders, and there could be opportunity in terms of having origin-focused collaborations in terms of the chocolate category. Chocolate is a very, very large category in the UK, and we're already making some recommendations about a specialty chocolate brand that is doing these kind of collaborations. I think there is a market potential for that kind of product. But again, certifications are going to be key when it comes to marketing those products and making them fit in with target customers who would buy in with what is quite a specialty message in terms of uniting these different producers from different locations and having such a focus on the point of origin and on the sustainability messaging that comes with it.
There's another question from Ian Sayers about Cocomat. Cocomat is expanding rapidly in the business of using coconut fibers to replace artificial materials and wool in mattresses and seats. So it's not really a question, but it's just another category to consider. I don't know if it's something that you look at.
It's
Not
definitely
currently.
Yeah, I was going to say we are a food and drink and grocery sort of expertise. We certainly, we are aware of these industries and the changing needs, especially with regards to coconut fibers and especially the hyperallergenic properties, but it's not our area of expertise. I would say it's fair to say.
Just to add to that, I know they are using coconut fibers in the internal design of cars that makes the cars actually lighter, cause reduce emissions and so forth. So I know some companies are actually experimenting with coconut fiber.
Somebody has said on the chat that Harrods are selling coconut husk mattresses, which is I've not been in Harrods for quite a few years. It's far too expensive for me. But it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to hear. I didn't know that. So I'll certainly keep an eye out and can update. Could be something, could be an interesting byproduct that we can look at, Tom. I've never really come across it, to be honest.
We're going to have to move on. There are a lot of questions in the chat. Maybe if we have time at the end, we can address them. Just one more question there before I introduce Tristan to you from CARDI. From a farmer perspective, I think this question is perhaps more for CARDI and also Wayne from Coconut Industry Board. From a farmer perspective, there are wide varieties of coconut. Some of these products require specific varieties, which we don't know. Is there going to be a forum in the future specifically to focus on various varieties for these products? Are there potential access of coconut seeds for export? Is there a structured plan in place to direct or guide specific countries on which variety to grow? So I'm putting this question to CIB and CARDI because you know, the farmer perspective is something that is important to Alliances for Action. Would you have anything to say on that, Wayne or Tristan or anyone else from CARDI?
I could give a response to it, Sarah, if you don't mind. So it's a place that we need to get to in terms of industry parameters, in terms of which varieties are best suited for coconut oil, which varieties are best suited for coconut water, which varieties would give you the best fiber for certain purposes. It's research that has to be done. Some of it has been done in terms of varieties which are best suited for oil and water, but it may not have been documented and shared publicly in the type of way that we would have liked it to. So definitely areas for development and an area that we're going to get into.
Thank you, Tristan. And just one last question before I move on to Tristan. This one is for Tom and Martin. In terms of label requirements, I've noticed the UK guidelines for labeling, and is there a body that approves labels of products? I don't know if you can answer this.
Food products you don't need to get them signed off or approved as such. It's very much left in your hands. It's always worth using a local expert that knows what they're doing. They do follow EU legislation at the moment, as I've said. So no, you don't need to register them as such. What you do need to do with organic products is register them with a local certifier and store them in an organic warehouse. So that does need some registration. But in terms of the actual product, apart from barcodes or which may require registration, there's no formal registration thing for labels. And the only time that you would have to deal with the government is if you've done something wrong and been reported for it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tom and Martin, for your participation. That was really useful for everyone. And I'd like to introduce you now to Tristan Alvarez from CARDI, so the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute. Tristan, if you have some closing remarks. Tristan?
Okay, so thanks, Sarah. And let me just say that the previous presentations by Dr. Myrie, Tom, and Martin have been really inspiring and interesting. And to do justice in terms of a recap is quite a task, but let me see how well I can do so, as well as offer some advice to our listeners on this webinar. So let me start off by stating one of the first things Dr. Myrie pointed out, that coconuts is an important contribution to food security within our region. One of the things you may not know as well is that our Council for Trade and Economic Development would have identified coconuts as one of the priority commodities for development within our region. To that effect, it has been given a point of focus. Hence, we have been able to conduct 2 regional projects regarding coconuts. One of the things also stated is that the goal is an integrated regional coconut industry that is also sustainable. And this is something that we really need to achieve. We need to mirror some of the progress that has been made in the Pacific by some of the other sister countries in terms of the Philippines and Indonesia, etc. What you would find, as Dr. Myrie also pointed out, is that there are some cross-border investments taking place within the region that we really should take note of in terms of production taking place in Guyana. And we have investments in Guyana by way of persons from Trinidad and Tobago either producing in Guyana or purchasing much of their raw materials from Guyana. Similarly, the Dominican Republic purchasing their raw materials, which they process. For example, Trinidad and Tobago utilizes its low energy costs to process its products and export it to the rest of the region. This is something we could look at and mirror and adopt perhaps as our model in terms of scaling up production as well as product development and being able to tap into the export markets. Right? Let me also talk about the general trends that would have been identified and how they relate to the different categories in terms of the UK market, that being the hospitality, food service, and retail markets, cosmetics, confectionery, and food. So what we've been seeing, or what has been said, is that the cosmetic industry is one of the major growth areas for the UK market. And what I could also say is that perhaps it's a mirror of what is taking place in the region. We're finding that more and more coconut products are going into the cosmetic industry for the creation of spa products. We have in Trinidad and Tobago, by way of an example, a coconut oil producer. That's his primary, or it was his primary product. However, he is now diversified into the cosmetic line, where he has created a series of cosmetic products. So perhaps he is also well aware of the market trends and has been an early adopter in terms of getting on board that particular train. I know in some of the other Caribbean countries, though they may not be at the scale of this particular process in Trinidad and Tobago, they have also utilized to quite an extent coconut products, coconut oil, as part of their spa product development as well. In terms of the food service confectionery, part of the culture of the Caribbean has been that of food and treats or snacks derived from coconut products or coconut material. And it's right across the board. Much of our recipes hinge upon the use of coconut. And I must say that if it is we bear relation of that to the UK market, one can ascertain that there's still a vibrant domestic market for this type of intervention to take place. And in terms of the retail market, in terms of food and food-related products, much of it that we see as trending in the UK is also trending here. And in terms of the general trends where we talk about healthy, sustainably grown, ethical, etc., those trends are also reflected in our own local markets by way of the food products that we see in our supermarket shelves. For the Caribbean region, some of the products that I have seen come out of the United States, and it's being promoted as organic and wholesome. Despite those products being on our supermarket shelves, there are a lot of other local products, though they don't have that particular tag of sustainably grown or ethical considerations or organic behind it. So what we find is that these products from the United States become niche products in a sense in our own neck of the woods, so to speak. In terms of more specific commodities, coconut water, it was said that the UK market is relatively unreceptive to flavors. However, one of the trends or global trends is that of using coconut water as a base ingredient in the beverage industry. In the Caribbean, we typically know coconut water to be a base ingredient when it comes to mixing alcoholic beverages. Within the rest of the world, they utilize it in the creation of smoothies, fruit cocktails, to give you different or very unique flavor profiles. And this is some of what is trending across the world. Also, the promotion of coconut water as a healthy sports drink, recognizing its isotonic properties comparable to that of Gatorade. So coconut is a natural form of Gatorade if it is you want to market it that way, right? It was mentioned in one of the questions that whether or not there's a market in terms of frozen coconut water. And this is wherein lies the challenge, that coconut water is such a perishable item that there needs to be much more research and development in terms of extending the shelf life of such a product without destroying the enzymes that give this coconut water its natural and unique flavor profile. When it is we're talking about distant markets such as the UK, okay? in terms of the milk and cream industry, similarly, we see those trends here in the Caribbean as well as in the UK, where there is an increase in plant-based milk. I know there has been a great uptake in terms of almond milk here on the local market in terms of Trinidad and Tobago. And we all know coconut milk in terms of its powdered form as adding to our dishes when we do our food preparations as well. So it's quite well known to us. And I must say it's an industry that perhaps, I'm not sure if it would have been matured in the Caribbean region, but definitely the diaspora is a target market within the UK and other areas of the world by which we could look at in terms of export. In terms of sugar and flour, regarded as emerging markets, more so along the niche aspect of things. Yes, so we see sugar, coconut sugar and coconut flour really sold in these small organic shops being touted as healthy, coconut sugar in particular being marketed to those who are glycemic, recognizing that it has a low glycemic index, although research may indicate that despite coconut sugar having a low glycemic index, there may not be an impact upon a person's health in terms of either positive or negative, recognizing that sugar is still sugar. However, it's the marketing that we're concerned about in this context and it being a niche product. Similarly, coconut flour and those persons who are trying to escape those products that have gluten in it then becomes a commodity of interest, and being able to market or promote a product in such a light. One thing mentioned is that the UK market is fierce competitive and there's a high failure rate with the entrance of new products. One of the things that we need to also take into consideration is that this is something that is an option. So this webinar speaks particularly to the UK market. However, I don't want the listenership to leave this webinar forgetting about the domestic space and the regional space within which we operate. There's still a wide market and still a reasonable enough demand for us to enter with a range of different product categories. What we have found is that products from the Pacific, Philippines, Indonesia, etc., have realized a foothold within our region. At the last webinar, you would have heard from a presenter that Grace, even though they produce a lot of coconut products, much of the inputs come from our sister countries in the other parts of the world, the Pacific. So there's still room for us to have a foothold in terms of the domestic market, in terms of bringing to bear our local coconut products for our market. And perhaps this could be a question for later on as well in terms of the UK market, it being so fierce and competitive. I'm curious as to whether or not the retail chains themselves, if there's a need to pay for shelf space within the UK markets as well. This is also a consideration, and another part of the UK market which is extremely competitive, right?
Thank you. Tristan, are you finished?
No, let me just, yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries. So let me just quickly, if you're seeing my screen, Sarah?
Yes?
You're seeing my screen?
No. You want to share your screen?
Yes.
Yeah. You just click the share screen. Yeah. Yeah, we can see.
All right. So
just quickly, Tristan, I just we just have a couple of minutes left. If we're going to stay.
No problem. I'm wrapping up. So just in terms of a further summary and the way forward, what we need to do is become more market oriented. Okay, we also need to develop relevant value propositions. As Tom and Martin shared with us, that the UK market is extremely competitive and the entrance of new brands is something that is really difficult. So either you need to come forward with a very relevant value proposition, or you need to piggyback on an existing brand or chain within the UK market. There's a need to enhance your value chains, and also there's a need to achieve the right scale of operations. I'm saying this in terms of volume versus niche, what it is you're after, right? Here's also we're talking about adopt branding and to consider geographical indicators. Taking it from the first webinar that we had, that where Sarah indicated, what is this Caribbean story that we have to tell behind the coconut product? And knowing coconut is part and parcel of our history and livelihoods, I'm sure there are many stories that we could tell behind coconuts and the products that we wish to develop. Also, partnerships, alliances, and networks, we recognize this as critical for success within business and in any venture. Hence, you would find that these webinar series are called Alliances for Action, utilization of the appropriate technologies. And we talked about products, but we didn't hint so much so on the need to increase production and productivity, as much of all that is exported or processed really hinge upon that raw products that is grown out in the field. And we know that demand is high, but supply is nowhere near to meet demand at this current point in time. So we need to ramp up production and productivity in order to meet the scale of operation that perhaps we might want to achieve. So like I said, going big in terms of high volume mass production units, or going niche in terms of customized high value products within specific segments of the market. This is just a graphical representation of that. So at the top tier of the pyramid, you have organic coconut sugar and coconut flour, recognized as those niche products. You have your commercial products, which are the virgin coconut oil or the refined bleached deodorized coconut oil, packaged and processed coconut water, etc. And at the bottom tier, where some of us may find ourselves typically, is that of the raw products. So in terms of going forward, there's a need to change our way of thinking. We need to have an outside of the box thinking. We need to be innovative. We need to create smart, efficient value chains, logistic chains as well. We also need to work together in terms of alliances, networking, and synergies. Research and development remains ever so critical in terms of increasing productivity, increasing or enhancing product development, extending shelf life, creating a downstream industry from coconut waste material. And there's a market for that as well. I don't want us to leave this webinar without recognizing that the waste products that come out of coconut processing, there's a way that that waste material could be converted into products that could benefit much of the consumers and the population of the Caribbean and the world. Let me just make a plug here in terms of there's a shift now away from single-use plastics. Waste material from coconut, whether it be fiber or the tree trunk or the wood, can be repurposed into products within the retail industry, such as forks, knives, spoons, food trays, etc. Right, and just also quickly, some of the other success factors: scaling up, value added, branding, exporting, cooperation, sustainable production, research and development, and marketing. And Sarah, let me leave it at that for the time being, and welcome any questions from the floor at this point in time.
Thank you, Tristan. Thanks for that. Just quickly looking at the chat to see if anyone has any last questions. There's just a message from Barton Clark to everyone. So where did it go? Notwithstanding the COVID-19 dynamic, efforts are to be made to target the Caribbean tourism sector more aggressively. So this is just a remark rather than a question. Thank you, Barton. So there's a lot of information there. I'd like to thank all of you for your presentations. And I'd like to thank the European Union, OACPS, CARIFORUM, CARDI, Coconut Industry Board, and International Trade Center once more, all active partners that have made this webinar series possible. I'm quickly going to share, before we leave, the preview for webinar 5, so the next webinar, which is going to be on safety measures and value addition post-COVID-19, an opportunity for growth. We're going to be having presenters from the Scientific Research Council in Jamaica and from the Association of Ghana Industries also. So it's going to be sort of presentation on lessons learned and best practices. And just before we leave, so that we don't have to bother you with a follow-up feedback by email, I'll quickly put a poll up right now. It's just a couple of questions. This poll is anonymous. So if you say it wasn't very satisfactory, no one will know it was you. Thank you for completing the poll. So thank you once more, everyone. And the next webinar is going to be on the 24th at the same time. So I look forward to welcoming you there again, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you, everyone. And do be aware that the recording of this webinar will be on CARDI's website, as are the first 3 already. But you'll be notified by email. Thanks everyone for voting. Okay, I have everyone now. In the poll. Okay, goodbye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.